Federal Medical Center, Carswell. Over the years, a bunch of articles have popped up online accusing FMC Carswell of various forms of prisoner mistreatment like neglect, misconduct, and medical malpractice. To back up these allegations, 7 staff members were found guilty of mistreating inmates over a period of 7 years. This facility was once where Emma Coronel Ispuro, the wife of the notorious drug lord El Chapo, was held. After marrying El Chapo, Emma got deeply involved in the cartel's operations. She wasn't just a supportive partner, she played an active role in the cartel's dealings, helping with communication and logistics. In February 2021, she was arrested at Dulles International Airport, facing charges of conspiracy to illegally import and distribute drugs and money laundering. On June 10, 2021, Emma struck a plea deal with the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, opting to waive indictment and pleading guilty to 3 charges. By November 2021, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by 4 years of supervised release, but her sentence was later cut down to 31 months. Emma has since been released. Next up is a prison where inmates have to deal with sleeping alongside insects in their cells. Santa Martha Acatitla Women's Prison. Santa Martha Acatitla Women's Prison, located in Mexico City, has gained notoriety for accommodating some of the most perilous female offenders in Mexico. Among its prominent inmates was the notorious drug trafficker Sandra Avila Beltran, whose tenure at the institution was fraught with controversies and grievances. She lodged complaints with a Human Rights Commission in Mexico City, highlighting the infestation of insects in her cell, which she described as noxious fauna. Additionally, she objected to the prison's prohibition on bringing in food from external restaurants, asserting that it infringed upon her human rights. Sandra's descent into criminality was almost inevitable, given her family's extensive ties to the drug trade. Her uncle, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, was a significant figure within the Guadalajara cartel, often referred to as the godfather of the Mexican drug trade. Reports indicate that Sandra engaged in relationships with several prominent individuals in the drug trafficking sphere, which not only reinforced her standing, but also broadened her influence. The most pivotal relationship in Sandra's criminal endeavors was with Juan Diego Espinoza Ramirez, known as the Tiger. Espinoza Ramirez was a crucial figure in the Colombian Norte del Valle cartel, and together they orchestrated the smuggling of substantial quantities of cocaine from Colombia to Mexico. Despite her affluent lifestyle and the accompanying wealth, Sandra successfully eluded capture for an extended period. However, her decline commenced with a personal crisis in 2002 when her son was abducted for a ransom of $5 million. In her desperation to ensure his safe return, Sandra contacted law enforcement. This unforeseen interaction with authorities aroused suspicion and initiated an investigation that ultimately led to the collapse of her criminal enterprise. It required over 4 years and the concerted efforts of 30 federal agents to compile sufficient evidence for her arrest. In September 2007, Sandra was apprehended in Mexico City, along with her associate, Juan Diego Espinoza Ramirez. She faced serious charges, including organized crime, conspiracy to engage in drug trafficking, and money laundering. In June 2012, Sandra was extradited to the United States, where she pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact to drug trafficking and received a sentence of 70 months in prison. In this subsequent correctional facility, there is a risk that inmates may experience mistreatment. Dame Phyllis Frost Center. Dame Phyllis Frost Center was previously embroiled in a significant scandal. In 2003, a mentally ill inmate was transferred to a psychiatric facility and subsequently discovered to be pregnant. DNA testing indicated that a male prison guard had assaulted the inmate. He was charged, but entered a plea of not guilty. Currently, the Dame Phyllis Frost Center houses Judy Moran, the matriarch of the Moran crime family. Judy Moran's early life was largely unremarkable until her marriage to Leslie Johnny Cole, in 1963, a man heavily involved in the gangland conflict surrounding Sydney's drug trade. Their union produced a son, Mark Cole, born in 1964, who would later be recognized as Mark Moran. In 1966, Judy entered into a relationship with Louis Moran, a prominent criminal figure in Melbourne. The Moran family quickly established themselves within Melbourne's criminal hierarchy, with Judy at the forefront. In 2000, Mark Moran was murdered amid the gangland wars. 3 years later, Judy's other son, Jason Moran, was also violently killed. The murder of Louis Moran in 2004 signified the conclusion of a significant chapter for the Moran family, while simultaneously reinforcing Judy's position as the family's matriarch. In June 2009, Desmond Moran, Louis's brother, was shot dead. The investigation into his murder led authorities to Judy. Merely a day following the incident, Judy Moran and 3 accomplices were apprehended in connection with the crime. The evidence presented against Judy was overwhelmingly incriminating. Police surveillance footage documented her efforts to hide the getaway vehicle in her garage, followed by her actions to dispose of it. Inside the abandoned car, Authorities discovered a rifle, a crucial piece of evidence that connected the crime to Judy Moran. Furthermore, white gloves, which were reportedly worn by Judy while operating the vehicle, were located discarded in nearby foliage. A thorough search of Judy Moran's residence uncovered a concealed safe that contained 3 handguns, 2 stolen Victorian license plates, a wig, and garments that corresponded with witness accounts of the shooter's clothing. This evidence indicated that Judy had meticulously planned and carried out the crime. In 2011, Judy Moran was convicted of the murder of Desmond Moran and received a sentence of 26 years in prison, with a non-parole period set at 21 years. Next, there is a case involving a newborn baby who died as a result of medical neglect. Judy Moran, along with 3 accomplices, was arrested in relation to the crime. HM Prison Bronzefield. The infamous leader of the Norwich mistreatment ring, Marie Black, is presently serving a life sentence at HM Prison Bronzefield, a facility known for its history of inadequate medical care. In 2019, an inmate at this facility was compelled to give birth alone in her cell without any medical assistance, resulting in the tragic death of her child. The prison's medical personnel have been subjected to multiple inquiries regarding their decision to leave a pregnant inmate unattended during childbirth, yet none have yielded satisfactory explanations. Alarmingly, this incident was not an isolated case, as the prison's healthcare staff had previously failed to provide sufficient medical support to other pregnant inmates. Marie Black's incarceration at HM Prison commenced in 2010, a year marked by the gradual exposure of the sinister activities of a child mistreatment ring in Norwich. The initial revelation of this abhorrent operation came to the attention of law enforcement through a report that described the horrific experiences endured by 2 boys and 3 girls, all under the age of 13, who had been ensnared in a cycle of abuse perpetrated by a group of depraved individuals. In response, the police initiated an investigation. By December 2012, the inquiry advanced significantly with the commencement of Operation Moccasin, which involved 7 investigators and the examination of thousands of documents. By 2015, members of the Norwich mistreatment ring had been apprehended and were facing legal consequences. Central to the case was Marie Black, the ringleader whose actions had profoundly affected the lives of her young victims. Marie Black, along with her accomplices Jason Adams and Michael Rogers, faced numerous charges. Ultimately, Marie Black was convicted of 23 offenses, including child mistreatment, conspiracy to mistreat children, and inciting a child to engage in inappropriate activities. She received a life sentence with a minimum term of 24 years to be served. Federal Correctional Institution, Aliceville. The Federal Correctional Institution located in Aliceville has been home to several prominent inmates, including the notorious drug trafficker Alice Marie Johnson, who was serving a life sentence until her pardon by former President Donald Trump in 2018. In 1991, Alice, a single mother of 5, faced severe financial difficulties that culminated in her declaring bankruptcy and losing her home to foreclosure. In her quest to support her family, Alice became entangled with a cocaine trafficking organization based in Memphis, which was responsible for distributing between 2,000 and 3,000 kilograms of cocaine in the Memphis region. Within this organization, Alice held a leadership role, overseeing drug transactions and managing the distribution of cocaine. She was also implicated in money laundering schemes, which involved structuring financial transactions to evade law enforcement scrutiny. In 1993, Alice's illegal activities led to her arrest, and in 1996, she was convicted on 8 federal charges, including conspiracy to possess cocaine with intent to distribute and money laundering. She received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In 2013, Johnson was moved to the Federal Correctional Institution in Aliceville, Alabama, to be nearer to her family, and she ultimately received clemency in June 2018 after serving 21 years. This facility has garnered the moniker the Mistreatment Club due to the pervasive mistreatment of inmates by the staff. Federal Correctional Institution, Dublin. A 2022 investigation into the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin revealed a deeply entrenched culture of inmate mistreatment by staff members. The prevalence of misconduct was so significant that inmates referred to the facility as the Mistreatment Club. As of 2024, over 68 former inmates have initiated lawsuits against the staff of FCI Dublin. Dublin was previously associated with Heidi Fleiss, the infamous Hollywood madam who operated a prostitution ring. Fleiss's involvement in criminal activities began in the late 1980s. At the age of 22, her life took a significant turn when she met Madame Alex, a well-known figure in the Los Angeles prostitution industry. Introduced to this world by her film director boyfriend, Ivan Nagy, Fleiss quickly became immersed in Alex's operations. Madame Alex, recognized for her elite clientele and confidentiality, identified potential in Fleiss. At that time, many of Alex's employees were approaching retirement, leading to an increasing demand for new talent. Fleiss capitalized on this situation by reorganizing the business and recruiting a fresh group of young, attractive women women. By 1990, Fleiss had surpassed her mentor and chose to establish her own prostitution ring. After severing her ties with Madame Alex, she reportedly earned her first $1 million within just 4 months. However, law enforcement soon began to scrutinize Fleiss's activities. In June 1993, her operation was dismantled when she was arrested on charges that included attempted pandering. In September 1996, Fleiss was convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to 7 years in prison, beginning her sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. This particular prison emphasizes punishment over rehabilitation, focusing on penalizing inmates rather than facilitating their transformation and improvement. Federal Prison Camp, Alderson. FPC Alderson has operated under a punishment-oriented framework rather than a rehabilitative one since 2004. Inmates at this facility are also prohibited from engaging with businesses in the Alderson vicinity. Among the notable inmates at Alderson is Catherine Kelly, the spouse of the notorious criminal George Machine Gun Kelly. Originally named Cleo Lyra Mae Brooks, she adopted the name Catherine at the age of 14. Following 2 unsuccessful marriages, Cleo relocated to Fort Worth, Texas, with her mother and stepfather. In Fort Worth, Catherine became immersed in bootlegging activities. Her third husband, Charlie Thorne, was involved in this illicit trade, but their marriage ended tragically when Thorne was discovered deceased, leaving behind a suicide note. It was in Fort Worth that Catherine met George Kelly Barnes, who would later gain infamy as Machine Gun Kelly. George was drawn to Catherine's charm and her criminal acumen. Together, they established a formidable alliance, participating in bootlegging and various other illegal enterprises. As their collaboration intensified, Catherine and George began to orchestrate increasingly audacious crimes. Their most notorious act was the abduction of oil magnate Charles F. Urschel in July 1933. The kidnapping was meticulously planned, with Urschel selected as their target due to his affluence and prominence in the oil sector. They transported him to a secluded farm owned by Catherine's mother, Ora, where he was held captive. The kidnappers demanded a ransom of $200,000, an enormous amount for that era, equivalent to over $4 million today. The ransom was ultimately paid, and Urschel was released without injury. Nevertheless, the Kellys' triumph was fleeting. Urschel's astute observations during his captivity provided the FBI with crucial leads. Armed with this information, the agency initiated an unyielding manhunt for the kidnappers. In September 1933, the Kellys were captured in Memphis, Tennessee. Catherine, George, and several accomplices, including Catherine's mother, Ora, and stepfather, were brought to justice. In October 1933, Catherine and George were found guilty of kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison. In this next prison, inmates stand a chance of being taken advantage of by the corrections officers. Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury. In 2008, FCI Danbury became embroiled in a scandal involving an inappropriate relationship between a corrections officer and an inmate. This relationship had persisted for a year, and while both individuals asserted that it was consensual, the officer had violated legal statutes. He ultimately pleaded guilty to the mistreatment of a ward and received a prison sentence. Danbury was also notable for being the residence of the infamous Chinese human smuggler, Sister Ping. Chung Chui Ping began her smuggling operations while living with her family in Chinatown, initially utilizing forged documents to transport small groups of her fellow villagers into the United States. By the mid-1980s, Ping had risen to prominence in the human smuggling arena, charging fees exceeding $35,000 per individual for passage to America. She became widely recognized as a snakehead, a term used in Chinese to describe individuals engaged in her line of work. Her smuggling operation was not only one of the largest, but also among the most sophisticated, amassing an estimated $40 million over the years. It was inevitable that her activities would attract the attention of law enforcement. In 1994, she faced indictment in a federal court in Manhattan for smuggling approximately 3,000 individuals from Fujian into the United States. However, Ping successfully evaded capture, fleeing to China where she continued her illicit activities. A significant breakthrough occurred in April 2000 when Interpol agents, who were monitoring passenger lists for flights from Hong Kong to New York, identified her son's name. Ping was subsequently arrested at Hong Kong International Airport. At the time of her apprehension, she possessed 3 passports, including a counterfeit Belizean passport under the alias Lily Zheng. Ping contested her extradition for several years, but in July 2003, she was ultimately extradited to the United States. In June 2005, Ping was convicted on multiple charges, including conspiring to commit illegal human smuggling, hostage-taking, money laundering, and trafficking in ransom proceeds. She was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. Officers in this next prison trade drugs and contrabands for sex with inmates. Federal Correctional Institution, Tallahassee. FCI Tallahassee has been embroiled in multiple scandals involving correctional officers who exchange drugs and other contraband for sexual favors from female inmates. This facility houses Jean McIntosh, a key figure in the Philadelphia basement kidnapping operation. In October 2011, a landlord in Philadelphia observed suspicious activities in the basement of an apartment complex. Upon investigation, the landlord uncovered 4 individuals who had been abducted. The case rapidly attracted the attention of both the FBI and the Philadelphia Police Department, prompting an investigation to reveal the full scope of the criminal activities involved. As the inquiry progressed, it became evident that the kidnapping was part of a broader scheme. Authorities found identification documents for at least 50 additional individuals during their preliminary search, indicating a possible multi-state operation. The underlying motive for these atrocious acts was believed to be the acquisition of Social Security disability benefits. McIntosh and her associates were taking advantage of the victims' vulnerabilities for financial profit. Linda Weston, Gregory Thomas, Eddie Wright, and Jean McIntosh, Weston's daughter, were named in the case. Initially, McIntosh's connection to the case was overshadowed by her mother's infamous criminal background. However, as the investigation advanced, her involvement became increasingly apparent. Authorities soon recognized that Jean had a substantial role in the operation. In January 2013, a federal grand jury indicted the 4 original defendants, along with a 5th suspect, Nicholas Woodard, on a total of 196 criminal charges. The allegations against Jean McIntosh included conspiracy to commit racketeering, hate crimes against individuals with disabilities, and kidnapping resulting in death. In December 2014, Jean McIntosh entered a guilty plea to the charges against her, and in August 2018, she was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Up next is a prison where inmates are strip-searched at least 6 times a day. Patrick O'Daniel Unit. In 2001, Brittany Holberg, an inmate at the Patrick O'Daniel Unit, disclosed in a letter to the Canadian Coalition that inmates were subjected to strip searches both within their cells and in the bathroom facilities. This facility currently houses Christine Paolilla, a convicted murderer. In July 2003, Christine, along with her boyfriend Christopher Snyder, planned a robbery aimed at stealing drugs from the residence of Tiffany Rowell, a friend of Christine's, located in Clear Lake City, Texas. Upon entering the home, they encountered Tiffany Rowell, Rachel Colarudis, Marcus Priscilla, and Adalbert Sanchez. A confrontation arose between Snyder and Marcus Priscilla, which quickly intensified. The couple then opened fire using a 9mm semi-automatic pistol and a .38 caliber revolver. The victims were shot multiple times and succumbed to their injuries. Rachel Colarudis attempted to reach a phone to summon help, but Christine fatally struck her with the butt of a revolver. The assailants left minimal evidence, leading investigators to initially consider a drug-related motive due to Marcus Priscilla's suspected involvement in drug trafficking. The only leads were the descriptions of the suspects provided by neighbors who had observed them entering and exiting the residence. Despite the brutal nature of their actions, the couple evaded arrest, and the case remained unresolved for 3 years. In 2004, the relationship ended when Snyder was incarcerated in Kentucky for car theft. Christine sought refuge in a rehabilitation center in Kerrville, Texas, where she met Stanley Justin Rott, a fellow heroin user. They quickly developed a close relationship and married in March 2005. Around this period, Christine received a significant trust fund from her deceased father, which she utilized to acquire an apartment. On the 2nd anniversary of the murders, Christine encountered a news report regarding the still open case. She confided in Rott, leading the couple to go into hiding in a motel room in San Antonio. A significant development in the case occurred in July 2006, when an anonymous informant reached out to Crime Stoppers, disclosing Christine's admission during her rehabilitation stay. This crucial information prompted law enforcement to locate Christine in San Antonio, ultimately leading to her arrest. This arrest signified the conclusion of Christine's fugitive status, as she was apprehended alongside Rott, who was discovered in their motel room with 70 vials of heroin. In October 2008, Christine Paolilla was found guilty of 4 counts of capital murder and subsequently received a life sentence in prison. Others contend that they should receive more humane treatment, asserting that incarceration itself serves as sufficient punishment.